Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the GepRC CineBot30. And for those that have followed the channel all these many years, you might know that the GepRC CineLog 25 was one of my favorite sort of cinewhoops at the time. But I didn't pick it as my favorite cinewhoop just because it does the flat, slow flying real well. But it flies like I want to fly, so in this category, this is my favorite. Now, one of its biggest drawbacks, and I've heard from many of you, is the prop protection durability. These tend to break quite a bit. They just don't stand up to our typical quad crashes. But in this CineBot 30, this thing, it's a lot more hardy. Now, I'm not going to do a typical crash test. I didn't say it was indestructible, but we must take it out and take a look. My naked camera here does not come with this kit. GepRC has their own naked GoPro. You can select to buy that from GepRC if you choose to at that time. From those of you that might be interested in just the frame, it is called the GepRC-CT30. Just a little bit of information for you there. This is the 6S version, so I have the 1804 2450 kV motors. The 4S version comes with 3450 kV. And our prop is the T76 from HQ. That wire shouldn't be out there, that's my mistake. You might be able to see the USB port for that all-in-one flight controller down there, which is the GepRC F722. It's a 45 amp all-in-one, and this is the V2 in that category. So obviously we have USB port to our flight controller. And down in this little hole down here, that's where our USB port is to our Vista Link, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Also, if you angle it a bit, you should be able to get to the bind button as well. I put my receiver out here on the arm again because I really found it very, very difficult to get this receiver, not inside, but to work on the soldering without disassembling too much. Although to take the frame off, you only have to take off 6 screws. It's just the combination of the wires and everything kind of being intertwined within the stack that made it difficult. I would suggest that if you're interested in this, just go ahead and buy it with the receiver of your choice, unless you have a very specific requirement. Obviously, I got the plug-and-play version, so I installed an EP1 receiver. I think it's an EP1. An Express LRS receiver out here on the arm. Works just fine, not very clean, definitely not very crash proof. We have our soft mounted camera platform, but it only moves up and down. It will not, well, it moves side to side, but it barely moves side to side, and it's not very soft. I didn't find it had an impact. I forgot to mention that the camera on the edition that I have is the Runcam Wasp. It comes with an XT60, but that might be specific to the version I have, which again is 6S. Not all 6S batteries in this size have XT60s or XT30s. It could be a mix and match. We've got a texturized rubberized battery mat, a GepRC 220mm 15mm wide battery strap, which does seem pretty hardy. I did finally find out that this antenna is fairly specific to GepRC. It's one they made themselves, and I'm fairly interested being a micro guy. It's tiny, it's light, and it's still flexible. And it's called the Pino, I think, P-E-A-N-O. It's still left hand, so you can use your regular goggle antennas with it when it running this particular system. We do have a 3D print back here for our antenna mounts. We can put in some tubes. We can run some traditional wire antennas out the back as well. And we do have a 3D print between the motor and the carbon fiber as well, but it's pretty solid. I think that might be more for color and interest than it is for, you know, soft mounting the motors. The camera protection up here is touted as 7075 aluminum, so that should be pretty hardy and protect that valuable camera. And if you can't tell from the slots in it, you can move a camera back and forth if you were to get a different camera down the road that might have a longer or shorter nose to it. It does come with a spare battery mat, the antenna tubes already mentioned, and the caps. It does come with a shorter battery strap. This one's only 200mm. Not quite certain what this 3D printed piece is for. Maybe I'll find some pictures of what that's for. Out of the box you get it, but I don't know what it's for. Extra set of props for the quad. A couple of different sizes and numbers of extra screws. You get these little wiring harnesses that you can connect to your naked GoPro or what have you for 4S and 6S. Both came with this kit. Micro USB cable, 2 Allen keys, a GepRC keychain that is made of carbon fiber. You do get a diagram, wiring map, and soldering key, you might call it, for the Gep F722 all-in-one that I already mentioned. And if you wanted to see the English side, this is it. You also get this promotional card, and you also get this quick start guide, which is kind of big for me to get all on the camera shot at one time. And last but not least, 2 sheets of stickers. The carbon fiber top plate looks to be 3mm thick, and you can see in both the front and the back, they have added these little cross supports to help sturdy up those arms in an impact. But the prop protection should hit first, right? It weighs 224¼ grams. If I add my naked GoPro 9 as well as its power adapter, it weighs 274¼ grams. For the slow cruisy flight, I flew it on this 6S Tattoo R-Line 1050 mAh battery, which brings the weight up to a whopping 452 grams. I also flew it on this 850 6S full send battery, but it didn't make the video. And with that battery, it's 416 and almost a half grams. In the faster flight, I did use this G&B 650 6S battery. And that, with the naked GoPro, which I did not fly it with the naked GoPro in the faster flight, is 377 and a half grams. But if I remove the naked GoPro and its power connector, we get 327 and a half grams. On the website, they say it's 127mm motor post to motor post, and I'd say that's pretty close. They also embedded some nice lights that go all the way around the quad, and I definitely approve of the color. We have ourselves a beautiful day here. Barely, hardly any wind, at least for my area. It never gets, completely 100% calm, but a little bit overcast as far as the sky. We'll get some cloud cover, and the sun will peek out from time to time as we cruise through this first flight. Of course, this is the primary time, and as I've printed on screen, I have a 6S 1050 battery, and it flew for 8 minutes and 16 seconds in this flight style with the naked GoPro on top. We're actually watching the naked GoPro footage right here. Again, that's the naked GoPro 9. I know Flywoo, I think, has the 10 and the 11 that's naked now. These cameras aren't cheap, but for those of you that like to fly and get your shot, get one of those real scenic, nice, beautiful to look at places, and you want to share that with others, naked GoPros are kind of the way, aren't they? Especially if you're not carrying a large 5-inch sort of prop. I think there are plenty of 3-inch cinewhoops that can do the job. They just don't do it quite as long as their larger prop brothers. But it flies nice and steady. No real jitters to speak of. No real flight characteristics in this sort of flight style that I can call out and draw your attention to. I think there is in the faster flight one particular flight characteristic that I have to call out, and it's very apparent to see it. It's not a horrible, horrible thing, but it's definitely a flight difference that isn't quite the norm. This was the morning after the Infinity Loops live stream. By the way, if you're not familiar with Infinity Loops, I'll put a link down to their channel down in the video description. They are also micro guys. You'll find everything from trick tutorials, skits that are hilarious, and I love that sort of stuff. I hope they never stop doing skits. Send them ideas for other skits they can do so I can enjoy that. Racing for micros, tiny whoops as well. Also do a lot of simulator stuff, so you can enjoy new maps that are made by others for the computer simulators that we use for FPV. But I had gotten, 70% of the yard done. I ran out of gas and it got dark, and then this is the morning before I got started again. You can see I'm wearing a jacket over there underneath the pergola. Still have shorts on, but the jacket will come off as I get the mower and the blower going all over again. Long weekend. I did get a few flights. I could not pass up this time with it being warmer than normal. At least I think it was warmer than normal. And the winds were just so low, and we did have some sun out. So I wanted to make sure I got this thing out and gave the batteries a try. I think at this time I ran through all of the batteries that I have for 6S doing the slow cruisy flight. And decided I probably should stick with the biggest one, because with the bigger one, it'll be able to put up with more winds, and because we've got no shot at getting under 250 grams, that's not an issue. So if you're going to go out flying trying to get your shot, it seems to me that you'll want to use a bigger battery. So you want to see how it flies with that bigger battery. Certainly we don't want to watch 8 minutes and 16 seconds. Those of you that come to the channel are pretty familiar with the house, although there'll be some minor differences with the lawn care. All the leaves, it's like somebody dumped all the leaves back. 2 days of wind here in the last 2 days, actually, and the backyard is just covered again. The front yard is still in pretty good shape, so I'm hopeful that will hold out until this weekend. But I'm going to be right back in the backyard doing it all over again this coming weekend, which you might be watching this on the weekend. Kind of depends on when I get it edited and out the door. But let's go ahead and move into what I enjoy the most, which is faster, more aggressive flying, you know, hitting the throttle. See how it does. Okay, this is a different day. I believe this is Monday of this week. I did the faster flights over my extended lunch, and I'm running that G&B 650 milliamp battery on this. Use a smaller battery so I can be more agile. I can move a little bit quicker. Means the flight time overall won't be as long, but as you can see there on the screen, I still get 3 minutes and 24 seconds on that little 650 milliamp battery. And at the top of those punch outs, you might want to go back and watch that again. There's a little bit of a wiggle, almost like the idle is set a little bit too low, or we might need to tighten up the PID tune or need some throttle attenuation on the PID tune. I'm not certain. It's not often that we see that sort of thing outside of this form factor, and I am not an expert when it comes to tuning these sort of things, so I'm making some suggestions without kind of any knowledge. Now, this is the goggle view, or at least the goggle DVR, and I wanted to make sure that I called that out, though you don't get confused between the GoPro footage that we watched previously. That's not what you see in the goggles. That's what you get on your recorded camera, and then you put it into your computer, of course, and do as you wish. This is what we get out of the DJI goggles. Not the new slim line DJI goggles. Whoa, that was a really good one there. That wobble almost shook. It was like it was trying to hold its position, but it just couldn't quite do it. Maybe we just needed a little bit more eye on our pitch and our roll to hold that position. It might have been a little bit of yaw wiggle in there too. That's something that we can look at, and I'm sure there'll be some people down in the comments section that will have some great ideas. I know there are some really good PID tuners that come by, and they always amaze me by what they can pick up with just video, because when it comes to PID tuning, I've got to get my hands on the sticks and fly it. When I look at a quad, I can make some guesstimations, but I find the rest of you that make those guesstimations are much better at just watching video and making suggestions about PID tuning changes than I am. I really, I really feel like I'm out in left field and I'm making a guess as far as what we should do. But we've got those sliders, shouldn't take too many adjustments in order to get that. And you can see I do that same sort of maneuver a couple of times. It does a real nice job of getting 100% and getting up in the air, but it's just when you're at zero throttle and it's just kind of floating up there in the air, it kind of just wants to shake around. And again, there's not much wind, so that can't be the wind necessarily blowing it around. That's got to be something with our PID tune. Could be the aerodynamics as well, but make sure I call that out. Otherwise, it flies really nicely. I was pretty happy. I thought for something, I'm not a fan of 6S. I understand the advantage because I'm a micro guy, and I guess I'm slow to come around to 6S. It just feels like I have too much extra weight, and with 6S in my small space, how I like to fly, it does feel like I've got some extra weight. So if you're like me, I would look at this from a 4S standpoint. I think you'll be more pleased. But if you like that extra feeling of the weight, more voltage so that your flights will last longer, 6S is probably going to be the way to go. But I thought it flew really well outside of that punch that I was doing repeatedly in the flight because we've got so much time to fly. I felt like it was agile. I thought it held its lines pretty well as far as doing flips and rolls. When you snap to them, they snap into place. I didn't see any big bounces or anything like that. So overall, the tune works out pretty good. Here we go. I've got my business shoes on, my red business shoes and my gray business shirt, and our flight is over. Let's go back to the desk and cover a few more details. So I was a little bit concerned about how kind of rigid this platform is. It does have the dampening vertically. It just doesn't give as much as other platforms that I've seen. And you can see, like on the Axis Flying one, it's constructed very similar in that it's got these bolts that go through. They had a 3D print like gasket on theirs, and that might have helped it move around. But again, I guess if you got banged up a little bit, then maybe you might need a little bit more vibration dampening to make sure you don't get a lot of vibrations into your external camera. But it didn't affect the footage. It's just something that I noticed, and I wanted to make sure I brought that to our attention. It does not come with this already on the quad. You do have to assemble this. So this will be in a little bag inside the box. It's pretty dead simple. You only have to put in the screws. You don't have to worry about, holding a nut underneath and then screw it in. The screw is embedded into the carbon fiber. It's like a compression fit screw or nut, excuse me. So you just put the screws in. It holds real good. There's just two, not a third. Something else that I thought was interesting is they actually have the battery strap so you can run it sideways in 2 different positions. So that gives you some options if you're looking to build this particular quad and you wanted to run your battery in the traditional manner. But that seems like it would be a very short battery because of this platform. But maybe you take the platform off because you have no intentions of running it with an external HD camera. Maybe. And then you can get a more traditional battery. But I really prefer toilet tanking is what I call it. I don't know who came up with that, but it was not me. I can't take credit for it. I just think it's a good term because I think most of us, I think all across the world, our toilet tanks, the water tanks in the back of our toilets are kind of constructed the same as far as I know. But I'm not a world traveler. But it makes a lot of sense to me. So the toilet tanking, and I like how that toilet tanking feels, especially on a bottom-mounted quad on the roll axis, it just feels a little bit more normal or tighter. You see on their standoffs, they've actually done a little bit of etching. I don't know if that's a stylistic thing, but they've done the same thing in their smaller standoffs. The standoff does go all the way through the frame to make it rigid down here, so it's going up against this carbon fiber. And also, I think it was pretty interesting to me that how close they got the carbon fiber to the actual frame. It's very, very close. So that, you know, if it were to flex, that carbon fiber were to provide some additional rigidity, not just in where it's screwed down, but actually the lack of movement or ability to move in these spaces that we typically have gap between our frame and our carbon fiber. They've got little nubbins down here, so when we land, we're not landing on our screws, we're not landing on our base plate. There's, I guess, potential if you come in with really hard landings, those could break. Although, again, I was flying it with big, heavy batteries, and my landings aren't always so graceful. I didn't have any troubles over the course of about 5 days flying this quad, excuse me. I didn't do extensive crash testing on this, and I know some of you will look at me and go, whoa, what's the story? You know, because I tend to get maybe too far with the testing side of things. But at the very least, this frame that they have is going to be much more rigid than the old one. Now, rigid doesn't necessarily mean durable, but, you know, I can bang it on this table, and it doesn't feel like it's even close to going to snap. And I kind of like it, so I don't want to smack it into the chimney like I did that other whoop, but they said theirs was indestructible. GepRC isn't touting that, so they get a pass. And that light that they've got down here, I really like that. My neighbor, Lamar, I may not have said his name on the channel before. He's into RC trains or model trains. He's got a big train set in his basement, which I may bring to the channel one day when he's all set up and ready for that sort of thing. He saw me flying this, and he was like, does that have lights on it? He was very keen on the lights, and that was during the day. So if you're in a car park or something of that nature that's, you know, lower light or dark, or maybe you're just outside underneath street lights, I think someone's going to be able to see those lights, especially if you're doing chases, and that might be kind of cool. I called out that wire, and that's because when I separated the two halves, that is the wire bundle that goes to the camera. I should have done a better job in tucking that back inside, but I will remedy that. While we're down here, they do have these little sleeves that they've used to protect the motor wires. I don't really think in this case it's actually going to be protecting the motor wires from the props actually striking it. It's possible, I guess. There's a lot of scenarios out there in the world, right? I think they're just using that to keep the motor wires, you know, in place. Whereas, you know, typically on a quad, we would see some of my favorite motor wire tape, excuse me. In this case, they just use these little sleeves that have the stickiness on the back side of them, which you can pick those up. I have seen those for sale for some of our other quad shops. Also, I didn't call it out, but there is a capacitor right down here. So when you disassemble your halves, you do need to be considerate of that capacitor, making sure you're not knocking it off or shifting it too much. I didn't have any problems putting things back together when it came to that capacitor, but it is something worth noting is that there isn't a lot of excess space in here. The tolerance, the distance between where the capacitor goes in this protective frame, it's very minimal, so you'll need to actually be careful with that. And I called it out previously, they've added these little supports. I think that that really does help give it some more rigidity. Typically we see that in unprotected propped frames, you know, we don't see the protection, so you might have a motor strike, but in this particular case, they went ahead and firmed those up. And it's a relatively thick arm out here. The back isn't as thick, and I've kind of covered up some of the nicety of the etching that they've got back here. I think it said CineBot30 underneath there, and we can see the GepRC logo on this particular arm. So nice little touches on some smooth carbon. Also, the screws up top, a nice job thinking about, you know, where the battery's going to go, and you don't want to have screw heads. These are nice and flush, so you don't have to be concerned about, you know, hunkering down your battery and then ending up with a dent or damage to your battery because screw heads popped up. On the bottom, the screws aren't recessed right here in the center, but they are recessed for the most part. They're not recessed as well. Like, these are like really flat down here, but I can still feel these out here, and obviously these are a different head, so I can definitely feel those. But I keep bumping the camera. I apologize for that. So GepRC, they always do some nice touches. Whether you enjoy their products or not, I'm, you know, not certain, but these are details that I think I appreciate when I look at a quad and some of its finer points. And while we're looking here at the bottom, we can see some more compression nuts. They just kind of shove those into the carbon fiber. They probably use a tool of some sort and crimp those in, and then that way you only have to use your own tool, your own hex driver in the top side, which this is not the right size for that. Oh, while we're looking here, got some additional nice little branding and touches here. It says GepRC down there, and then I think this is the 7075 around here. So a little bit more branding. You know, that stuff isn't free. It costs money. Speaking of cost money, let's take a look at the price. So right now it looks like in the HD, they're only selling this with the Link version, and the Runcam WAS camera with Express LRS comes in at $396.99. Of course, they have a naked GoPro 8 from GepRC that's available if you choose to go that route. Let's see what the 4S version is going to cost. Same, $396.99. If you get the plug and play version, which is actually what I got, it's $379.99. So not a whole lot of a price difference. Oh, and I did a little bit more digging, and there are a couple other versions. There is a Waxnail version, which the price varies from $389 to $424 depending upon your options there. The analog version is, of course, going to be your cheapest version. It's also going to be the lightest version, if that's an issue. Is $259.99 up to $294. The version I have here, we've already done the pricing, but they also have a version with the Nebula Pro camera, which I think will be temporary because I don't think Caddx, I don't know, maybe Caddx can continue to make the Nebula Pro for a long time. I don't know. I just thought with that whole DJI relationship, there might be an issue there. So at any rate, the Nebula Pro camera version comes in at $389.99 up to $424.99, which is actually just potentially a touch more than the version that I have here with the Runcam Link WAS version, $10 more. So I was pretty pleased with how this flew, and I really liked that blue light, even though I fly by myself all the time. The kind of the thought of it having a blue light as I cruise around the yard. This is one I think I'm going to keep. It was very nice, very stable, especially for those flat shots that I might be able to get some family footage of or something like that. And I think it's going to be more durable than its littler brother from, what, 2 years ago, the CineLog 25. Hopefully they'll make a 25 version because I am partial to micros. So if I can get a little bit smaller, maybe get a little less weight, I'd be up for that. But I was pretty pleased with this. And I'm looking eagerly forward to your suggestions on making some changes for the PID tune so we can get rid of that little kind of waggle thing it would do at the top of those zero throttle moves. Because I like to fly things more aggressively too. And who wants a waggle in their footage? I'll have links down in the video description to the GepRC website or anybody else that might be carrying the CineBot30. If you're interested, those links are there for your convenience. They may be affiliate links. They may not be links to any affiliation I have with the company. I will always link wherever I can find stuff or wherever you tell me someone's selling it, whether it's in the US or outside of the US. You guys should buy things where you like to buy things, not from where I tell you to. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching. Don't forget, go subscribe to Infinity Loops, link in the video description.